What is going on, guys? This is the Daily Roto Sharks podcast for week 2 of the NFL season. I am your host, Evan Cheney. Today I am joined by co-founder of DailyRotoSharks.com, Ben Jocelyn, who goes by xBenJamminx on all the daily fantasy sites as well as Twitter. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for coming on and hosting again. One thing that I could definitely start off by saying is that we love having you here. And if there's one thing I can mention right before we start is we are partnered with Goat Score. If you've seen on Twitter, they're blowing up. They're a new way to rate yourself and your team based on your player history. And we have a contest going with them right now that if you join the FanDuel contest and win it, you could win a full free season to our NFL sheets. So check out the link that's on mine and CG's pages at xBenJamminx and at Daily Roto Sharks.
Yeah, I love that site over there. And then during the Daily Fantasy Players Conference back in November last year, I met Glenn, who's the founder of that site. He's an awesome dude. So, you should definitely be using Go just because Glenn's awesome. Right? So,
Yeah.
and of course, all the other features of the site are great as well. But, just because Glenn's awesome, I give it the A+ there. So let's just dive into these games, Ben. The first game that we'll be looking at here is the Carolina Panthers going up against the San Francisco 49ers at Carolina here. And we'll look at the 49ers offense first, where there isn't a whole lot to talk about here, but I do like one player in this matchup, and that is Jeremy Curley, who won the game Monday night against LA. I almost said St. Louis. He did see 11 targets in that matchup and did some good work there. So I don't know, Ben, is Jeremy Curley worth some kind of a play this week?
I think it's definitely viable to at least just consider him because of the fact that Blaine Gabbert's the type of quarterback that will have to check the ball down. But Carolina has some really good linebackers there. So I really don't know how Curley would be able to match up going over the middle there. So he'd probably be doing more out routes and hitches on going towards the sidelines. But I definitely see him more of a PPR play, like a DraftKings type play.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to fade someone, even if the defensive matchup is as good as it is. It's just hard for me to fade someone who's at 3K on DraftKings and is going to see double-digit targets.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't see. I can't see where that is a bad play. In cash or GPP. I can understand other people's concern. For the because the Carolina Panthers are who they are, but at 3K with the targets that he's seeing, possibly it's a hard fade for me this
Yeah,
week.
it's always a hard fade when you're going to get someone at that price who you think is going to have the opportunity. For me, the matchup and the fact that you may be able to get other players similar to that, at least price range, for better matchups, I think I would probably want to look through those first.
Yeah, and just looking at the rest of that 49ers offense, is there anyone else that you like? I mean, is there anyone else that's viable?
No, I mean, a lot of people were on Vance McDonald this past week. I wasn't on him, but he did manage to score a pretty late touchdown. But I think he only had one or two catches, so he's not someone that I'm very high on in this matchup or this team in general. When I did my San Francisco write up, there, I said they're just one of the teams that I really never look for offensively. In the right matchup, I think you can look at their defense, like if they're playing at home against a shitty Rams. But besides that, then not necessarily.
Yeah, the Rams really let a lot of people down, especially because their defense was just so highly owned in those that Monday night contest, which I ended up benefiting from, but you know, it was truly a good sight there. Looking at these Carolina Panthers offensive players, Cam Newton definitely catches my eye here. He's at 7,900. The matchup is just ripe against a very poor San Francisco 49ers team overall. I definitely like Cam Newton there. Uh, which of these receivers do you prefer here for a possible stack?
Um, Okay, so when you're looking at cash versus DPP, you have to think Calvin Benjamin's a good enough play and can come down with a touchdown, but they should have a significant lead in this game, and they should be able to put it away to the point where they may not need complete usage from him. So I think you can find value at someone like Funchess if you really were looking to pair, but with someone like Cam Newton, you don't have to pair. And if I was using him in cash games, I probably wouldn't be pairing him with anybody. So he would be a standalone play to me. Moving over towards GPPs, that's where I would get a little funky with Benjamin and Funches and maybe even Ted Ginn, but he didn't see the usage that he normally sees.
Yeah, what worries me about Devin Funches is that, I mean, against the Broncos, which how much can we really judge from that? He only saw 4 targets, only got 1 catch for 9 yards. His price has dropped to 4,300, however, so he just looks like a really interesting GPP-ish play there. Kelvin Benjamin, he's obviously one of the main receiving targets outside of Greg Olsen. He saw 12 targets in that game, so I really like seeing numbers like that.
He's
Greg
really
Olsen
the
is
only viable play to me in this passing on either side in the passing game. Maybe you could look at Greg Olsen when we get to that, but for the most part, it's really Kelvin Benjamin, GPP, or nothing, or a Cam alone, or maybe even like a Jonathan Stewart or something. But I really don't see too much merit to playing offense in this game.
No, Jonathan Stewart even. The only way I would consider Jonathan Stewart is if you stacked him with the Panthers defense, just to get the upside there. Other than that, I don't like the play a whole lot in that situation.
Right, he's going to get carries.
I agree with you.
But he's
What's that?
He's fallen off a little bit. He has Cam vulturing touchdowns, so it's not the best spot.
No, but I don't know, it's only for the upside purposes that I consider that situation.
Of course.
Yeah, so moving on to our next game here, we have the Dallas Cowboys going up against the Washington Redskins. And, Dak Prescott, if Dak Press choke, as I'd like to say, his price has gone up from 5,000 to 5,800. And I still don't see how people can use him. Just even after watching one game of him, I don't see how Dak Prescott is a viable quarterback for fantasy because I don't know. Ben, can you explain this to me? Can you just convey the thoughts that I want to say?
I was all over Dak Prescott in cash games on the main Thursday slate, so I definitely got burned with that. I still won all of my games, but I didn't finish as high in the tournaments as I would have been able to. He wasn't a tournament play per se in general, but I always put my cash games in a couple of tournaments just in case, and they cashed, so they would have done very well if he went off. But seeing a price jump when he did nothing the week before, he's going into a pretty bad matchup. I'm not bad, but you don't really have much going on for him at that price range. I would really rather a bunch of other people. I got burned by him, and to see his price go up $2,000 isn't really what I want to be looking at. And you're going to have Josh Norman on Dez for the most part, unless they try to avoid him. But Dez seems to be somebody who likes to stick on the left side too. I would have to look at some numbers to verify that, but as we know, the catch was on the left side, or the drop, I should say, was on the left side. So
Yeah.
I think he'll certainly see some Norman.
No, I don't know. I think if Washington goes with the same defensive game plan that they did last week, then Dez Bryant on the left side there is just going to maul Rashard Breeland. And, Terrence Williams can get shadowed by Josh Norman all day. I wouldn't
But
touch.
they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't shadow. If they were going to shadow anybody, which they didn't shadow Antonio Brown, and that was without Martavis Bryant or Marcus Whedon on the field, where they should have shadowed him. If they're not going to shadow Dez, they're not going to shadow Terrence Williams.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever they were doing on Monday night, whatever their defensive game plan was just poor in
It was
my
a
mind.
skeleton drill.
It was something, I tell you. But offensively for the Cowboys, I would certainly consider Dez Bryant as a tournament only play, very volatile, but 400, not a lot of people are going to touch him. So I kind of like the play there. And then Ezekiel Elliott, I'm okay with him at 7,300 for cash and GPP. I don't know. I like him against this Redskins defense that I don't really trust a whole lot.
Yeah, the Redskins, they were one of the teams that was supposed to be good against the run, and it just didn't really pan out. You know, they're kind of middle of the road against them. But Zeke, if you watch the game, you saw he really didn't have many running lanes, so there really wasn't much for him to do in that game, and they were really just clogging up those lanes for him. So I think that, I mean, I'm looking at FanDuel pricing 7,900. That's pretty high for me, especially for someone who didn't really produce. And I mean, as we know, week 2 is not week 1, but unless I saw a bunch of dump off passes to him or really wide open lanes, you know, like at that price range, I just don't see the tremendous upside.
No, and yeah, I mean, I can kind of agree with you there, but I don't know. I just have a feeling about Ezekiel Elliott. And then something also worth noting here is that the Dallas Cowboys have a very slow pace of play, which not only affects the number of opportunities that the Cowboys get, but it also affects the opportunities that the Washington Redskins get offensively. And this would be, this is a smooth transition into looking at the Redskins offense here in the spot. And I mean, there's some guys you can consider here. For example, Deshaun Jackson is always a good GPP receiver. He at a low ownership, I like him there. And Jordan Reed is always a solid tight end, one of the top tight ends in football, in probably the thinnest position in football. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on some of these Redskins guys?
Well, one thing I'd like to mention just before we cruise into Washington, Jason Witten is definitely going to be a play for me this week. At least on FanDuel. I'm not looking at DraftKings pricing right now, so we'll have you on that side for the DraftKings and me on this side for the FanDuel. But he had 14 targets last week. I mean, behind him was Cole Beasley at 12, and Dez Bryant only had 5. You know they're going to tell Dak to get the ball to Dez a little bit more, but 14 targets for a tight end in 1 week with a rookie quarterback is definitely confidence building for me. He doesn't have a very tough matchup. Even if that number comes down in targets, we could probably expect around 7 to 8 on the lower end, and we've already seen the ceiling higher than that. So at 5,900, I think he's definitely going to be a tight end play for me. So I just wanted to mention that before we move on to watch.
Yeah, and just a quick little touch up. We're getting a question here in the chat about Witten in tournaments, and I think you can consider him. I wouldn't go out of my way to roster him in tournaments, but I don't mind it,
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna roster Witten, someone like that, you're looking for either value, so you're looking for just pure value where you could pay down, where like if his price was lower 5,000, but if you're gonna be using him for GPPs, it's probably going to be wanting to target with Dak and maybe Dez or something like that. You want to do the combination there. So I wouldn't want to use him as a standalone target just because his upside in general just isn't there for that price. But in terms of cash games, I think you could safely expect 6 catches and possibly a touchdown.
Yeah. So now we'll look at these Redskins guys. Going off what I said before about these Redskins, Deshaun Jackson being a GPP play, Jordan Reed being one of the last solid tight ends in this league. I don't know. Is there anyone else worth considering here?
Okay, so if you were looking at PPR, I don't have the price in front of me. If you could grab it, that'd be great. Of Chris Thompson, I like him in terms of PPR. I expect Washington to be throwing the ball out of the backfield because they do have a pretty tough matchup going against Dallas corners. I think they're always kind of underrated. They always produce pretty well, and we've seen them hold some players back, but I like the wide receivers. I think Deshaun Jackson could explode on anybody in any game. Pierre Garçon, he's more of a possession guy who can hit a deep ball, but I don't really ever like using him. I don't think the upside's there. I like Deshaun Jackson for GPPs. I wouldn't really consider him anything cash. So this game, there's not a lot of cash plays for me, except possibly Witten and I don't know. Dez just doesn't seem to be getting the targets, or even when Romo was there. So I'm going to be a little bit more hesitant on Dez than I would have been in the past. But yeah, Washington, maybe Deshaun as a GPP, and I don't even know if I would go Jordan Reed this week. But tight end's been sketchy, so I'll definitely put him up in consideration. But I know the Dallas Cowboys are pretty decent against tight ends.
Yeah, we have a $5,200 price tag on Chris Thompson on FanDuel or DraftKings. Wait, yeah, 52 on FanDuel, 3,700 on DraftKings.
Okay, so DraftKings he would be a play for me, and FanDuel he wouldn't. What is Jordan Reed on DraftKings?
We got 6,800 on him on DraftKings.
Yeah, so and same thing. So I would use Jordan Reed more on DraftKings, even though he has the potential to do good. I know we have him rated pretty high on our sheets, so I definitely want to look more into the specific matchups. But it seems like the targets are there, and I don't here. Let me see what his red zone numbers were for week 1. Let's see. Oh, wait, I don't have targets. Oh wait, I don't have it for week 1 yet. Okay, I'll get that set up. But yeah, I think Jordan Reed's definitely a play.
All right. Yeah, I think you did a pretty good job, explaining all the aspects of that game here. Moving on to our next game here. Unless you have any last thoughts on the Cowboys-Redskins game, we have the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Look at the Cincinnati Bengals offense first. I definitely like this offense a little bit, not a whole lot, but there's some plays. Of course, AJ Green at 8,900 on DraftKings, 8,900 on FanDuel also. So that's cool to see, kind of.
What? It's Cincinnati versus who again?
We got Cincinnati and Pittsburgh.
Cincinnati at Pitt. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, so we got them. I find it interesting that AJ Green's the same price on both sites. That's pretty cool to see. Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh, yeah. I kind of lost my train of thought for a second. But
wait. Just to reiterate something, since we didn't cover it, I'm on Carolina defense this week, going against San Fran. We didn't touch on the defenses in that game, so I know they're going to be. I think they're the highest price this week, but I could see locking in against San Fran.
Yeah, I can fully get behind that as well. Yeah, so yeah, going back to this Bengals Steelers game here, we have some viability in terms of a receiver stack between Andy Dalton and AJ Green. I can never pull the trigger on going Andy Dalton naked, meaning without a stack around him. So I can't really do that. Andy Dalton and AJ Green are the two offensive players that I would pick that I would use on the Bengals. This game has a pretty high total of 48.5 as of now. And I do think that the Bengals are going to be playing a little bit of catch up. So I think Andy Dalton and AJ Green are your best bets here offensively. What are you thinking, Ben?
I mean, the first thing I would do in this game is probably just lock in Antonio Brown and DeAngelo Williams again. I mean, I did that last week, and it paid off very well. The prices didn't increase too much. I think DeAngelo went up 500. Antonio maybe went up like 100 or something like that. But these guys are just studs. So one thing that I would do tournament wise is you could stack what is it? Big Ben, Antonio Brown, DeAngelo Williams, and AJ Green. I think that you're really going to get Pittsburgh hammering out Antonio Brown versus Cincinnati, and you're gonna get DeAngelo on the back end again when Pittsburgh's up to be able to just run the ball out. They're favored by 3. AJ Green has a better matchup, and we know that even when he's playing against Revis, he's going to have the ball funneled to him. There's no Eifert. There's no Marvin Jones there anymore. So AJ Green, for me, against Pitt, he's almost a lock-it-in kind of play. So I may have exposure to this game in general because on the back end, you could look at Giovanni Bernard. If Cincinnati goes down, they'll probably start passing him the ball. And Jeremy Hill gets not a great matchup. So I would probably avoid him. I don't expect them to be up. So that's kind of the rundown I would give for running backs and wide receivers on first glance.
Okay, yeah, I mean that makes a good chunk of sense there in that regard. Yeah, so kind of looking at these Pittsburgh Steelers too on the other side of the matchup. I'm not considering. I mean, as a side note, I'm not really considering these defenses a whole lot here. Although you can make, at the same time, you can make an argument for both defenses. I know I'm like double standard, whatever, with myself, but the division matchup, in this game does kind of make it, kind of unfavorable, if you will, to roster quarterbacks in this game or just offensive players in general. But usually you see that effect in the second division game of a season and not the first one. But even though these two defenses are high-powered, I'm not really considering them here in this matchup. However, I am considering, Ben Roethlisberger as well as Antonio Brown. But Antonio Brown at 9,900 on DraftKings is just something to behold.
Jeez.
Yeah, he's 9,900. So man. I don't know if can you really use him there? And where do you find the salary cap to roster a $9,900 player?
Especially on DraftKings.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get – all right, so you're going to have to use him as a pair, right, as like a combo. So this is how I would use him if I was looking to use him on DraftKings. You have to find a player or two at very low value at, almost bare minimum price and use them as a package. So when you use one, you use the other as well. So instead of that 9,900, you're really looking at, an average between the two players of around $6,000 if you have like 12,000 total that you're using. So you kind of want to pair him with somebody of cheap value and use them together and consider them a package. So like you're using a 2-player package of $12,000 kind of, you know what I'm saying? So that's how I would consider it. But using him as a standalone 9,900, it's going to be really hard because you're taking up a big percentage of your salary cap there.
Yeah, it's hard to justify spending up 9,900 for anyone.
Right.
But FanDuel, he's definitely in play at 9,200. Still expensive, but
I mean, he paid that off, and he will pay that off. The thing is, if you look at his at least targets from last season, let me just get this going. He averaged 9 per game in the beginning half of the season and 15 per game towards the end of the season. We know Big Ben got hurt. We know that he averages around 10 per game. I don't see that number dropping below really double digits. He's going to get a minimum of eight or 9 like floor targets per week. So he's got the upside in every week, and we see he can make plays happen even when there's nothing there. So he's your number 1 fantasy pick in every season-long league for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and also DeAngelo Williams. You can't forget about him. Might go overlooked in the matchup against a Cincinnati Bengals team that has a very high public perception when it comes to his ability to, or their ability to stop the run. So yeah, definitely worth a look for him. Also because he has that PPR upside to him as
Right.
well. So he's definitely
He has
in play.
massive PPR upside.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's why he's. I mean, I much prefer him on DraftKings than to FanDuel, but again, I like the play on both sites. I like the upside, um,
What do
especially
you
if
think
you're
about tight ends?
in this game. The tight ends are just. I mean, you can go Jesse James if you really want to go on Twitter narrative street, but I'm not. I'm not going to go crazy for him.
Oh, I agree. He's not. He's someone that definitely has upside looking throughout the season. Um, this isn't the best play for me. If I expected Pitt to be losing, then I could see it and he would be the dump down. But I mean, he's got some kind of trust from Philip Rivers. I mean, he got 7 targets, but so did that kid Eli Rogers. So I think I would use them more if they were expected to be down, but I could definitely see using Jesse James in a GPP pairing. Even if you wanted to go crazy, if you expected Pittsburgh to go nuts, you could go, the whole offense, including Antonio, DeAngelo, Jesse James, and Big Ben. That's something that is more likely to be done on DraftKings where people stack a little bit more, but I mean, if you're gung ho on Pittsburgh, you could find value for him at 4,500 min price on FanDuel.
Yeah, I there. Yeah. So looking at our next game here, we have the New Orleans Saints going up against the New York Giants, and this is probably my favorite. Excuse me if I sound nasally or drippy or whatever. It's damn allergy season. Yeah. So probably my favorite. Probably my favorite game of the week here in terms of fantasy. We have the Saints Giants. Last year they gave us a show. Put up a ton of points in that game, backing Saints or Giants to some degree. You were probably losing all the money. So
that happens a lot with Saints games.
Well, I mean, neither of these teams have defenses whatsoever, so definitely worth a look on both sides of the ball here.
I'm pretty sure that game was in New York as well.
I think that was in. It was either. I mean, obviously, it was either in New Orleans or New York. I mean, there's not a plan C.
Let me check. And it was the middle of the season. It was like week 8 or something like that.
Yeah, it was one of them.
52-49 last year. That's quite a show.
Yeah, again, they put on a performance. Wow. Coby Fleener, I'm just going to say plays that I don't like because, I mean, right now, I just love everyone in this game offensively, but Coby Fleener just doesn't see targets. It just seems like in the game plan. Only saw 4 targets last week against the Oakland Raiders, who were just terrible last season against opposing tight ends. He only saw 4 targets with 1 catch for 6 yards. So I don't think I like Coby Fleener this week just because he's not going to see the targets. And I don't like playing guys who are just not going to see targets. I like Mark Ingram. I love him a lot. Willie Snead is probably going to be extremely chalk this week, especially after the game he put up last week. Helped me win a good chunk of change. Brandon Cook's also going to be highly owned, but not as much. Will probably go overlooked just because people are only going to be stacking one receiver with Drew Brees, and they'll probably go with Willie Snead because of the value. But why not both? Is there a reason why not to go both? And even Michael Thomas. No. I like Michael Thomas in this spot.
I mean, people who won a lot of money this past week went both. Unless they had A.J. Green instead of Cooks, which, they kind of canceled each other out. But if you wanted big money, if you look at those tournaments, a lot of them were just straight Saint stacks, which – I mean, that was, we knew that going in. That was like a Coors Field game going in. And I admittedly didn't have enough exposure to the Saints offense. I had Drew Brees as my cash quarterback in one of the slates for like everything. but I didn't pair him with anybody. I just used him as standalone just because he really can throw 4 or 5 touchdowns and have 4 or 5 different receivers catch touchdowns. So that's for me in cash. I didn't want to pair it, but in GPP, I actually went different directions and went with Winston. So I still got the Winston Evans combo for GPP, but I didn't get, those 2 touchdowns that Cooks ended up getting.
Yeah, and I was also saying, Michael Thomas even makes for a great play this week. Last week he saw 6 targets, caught all 6 of them for 58 yards, didn't score a touchdown, but with the way, like you were just saying, the way that Drew Brees distributes the ball, Michael Thomas is also viable in this matchup, and I wouldn't just automatically fade him because of his lack of a touchdown last week, because we saw that the targets were kind of there. And a guy who is 4K on DraftKings and 5K on FanDuel, I mean, I would kind of hesitate on the 5K on FanDuel, but definitely the 4K on DraftKings. I really like the spot for him there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough when you're looking at players who you don't really know and you're just expecting because they're in a certain situation that they're going to do well. But when you're looking out at complete shootouts like this, I think the value usually hits regardless, but I would probably rather look at Victor Cruz on the other side of the ball if he's looking good and healthy. But yeah, I mean, Brees slings it, man. He's always up there for the most attempts every year and every game for the most part. Both of these offenses have good matchups almost at every position in this game. So this is definitely a shootout, plug at almost anybody in kind of game. When I'm looking at it to separate cash from GPPs, running backs, I think Mark Ingram is always viable. I think Rashard Jennings this week even would be viable at his $6,300 price tag. He's going to be I think he will put up the same kind of game that Ryan Matthews put up in Philly this past week. So the PPR isn't great, but I think he still has the chance for a touchdown. And when you're looking at wide receivers, I think Beckham, Cooks, and Snead basically all make cash consideration. Sterling Shepard only had 4 targets this past week. So that isn't overly confidence building for me. But yeah, I mean, Michael Thomas got 6, Travaris Cadet got 7, so those guys will make it more on my GPP list. But for me, anyone who is cash basically is a GPP play for the most part if I consider their upside high enough.
Exactly. Looking at these Giants a little bit closer here, again, like we've been alluding to, no reason to fade a lot of these guys. Odell Beckham Jr. is 9,500 on DraftKings. Check his FanDuel price, 9,400 on FanDuel. Probably going to be higher owned, but worth the stack with Eli Manning. And then I would, my question then here becomes, when it comes to the second receiver that I'm stacking in this game with Odell and Eli, am I going Victor Cruz or am I going Sterling Shepard? I mean, right now, I would go with Sterling Shepard, although they both aren't seeing targets whatsoever. Both only got 4 targets each in the game, so I don't know. Obviously, a lot of the targets went to Odell Beckham Jr., though he only got 8. So I don't know. What are you thinking here in terms of these receivers?
I think that seeing only 4 targets for each of them isn't really. It's not something that would make me want to look at either, really, when you're getting less than 5 targets in the game. But we know that the pace is going to increase this game versus the Saints. They're gonna get more than 5 targets each, probably. I think when you're looking at GPPs, it's better to go Cruz. We know he has big playability. People will be off him because of the injury history and the fact that he only had 4 receptions last week. But I think that since everyone will gravitate toward Shepard, it just makes more sense to play Cruz if you think they have similar projections.
Yeah, I again, in that scenario, you obviously go with who's lower owned, and then Rashard Jennings. I don't know, is he somewhat viable here if he
Yeah,
can
I like
use it?
Rashad Jennings. I think that he's someone who's just overlooked as a runner in general. He kind of has that upright, smash you in the mouth feel to him. He's not going to catch a ton of balls. That's what they have Marine for. But I could see him getting, maybe 70 yards rushing and a touchdown, which isn't great for value. But in cash games, if you can tell me I'm going to get, 12 points or something like that, I could work with it.
Yeah, you're making some funky noises over there.
Am I?
No, it was just like one time you made some funky noises.
With my screen.
Uh, yeah. Um, that'll work into a nice little transition here into a funky team, uh, funky and bad, in the Miami Dolphins, not Marlins, but they are fish. So I was in the right category in terms of nickname. But Miami Dolphins going up against the New England Patriots in New England. Looking at these Miami Dolphins offensive players, I hate every single one of them this week, except maybe Jarvis Landry. Um, as to note here, Arian Foster is dealing with some hamstring soreness. Uh, it's very
That's
anal of
what
me to
happens
talk
when
about
you
this.
stand up for the national anthem.
That is what happens. You're
But at the
bending and
band
you're
marshals
getting
too.
all like tightened up. Not good stuff there. Um,
Yeah, you can't just lay down on the side. You got to get up.
yeah, I hope they figure that out in the training there, or the trainer figures that one out. But looking at this stuff here, again, Jarvis Landry is the only guy I can consider in this matchup. Maybe even Kenny Stills. Obviously, he dropped that beautiful touchdown pass last week, and I was kind of pissed off. But
The one thing you have to consider, or you always have to think about when you're playing the Patriots, is who is your number one guy, and then kind of just cancel him out. Just assume that he won't be making noise that week. That's just the way Bill Belichick is. That's the way he likes to play it. And I don't see any viability in Landry unless you're going on DraftKings. I don't think he has the upside for FanDuel this week.
no, I just hated on just all the Dolphins here. Quickly just moving to the Patriots. Um, I don't love anyone here for GPPs. For cash games, you can obviously consider Julius Edelman at 6,200 on DraftKings, who's the PPR god, and 7,100 on FanDuel, I guess the half PPR god there. LeGarrette Blount is probably, I think he's going to be the main guy in this game, but obviously James White is the pivot at 4K on DraftKings. And then Martellus Bennett, I don't like it at all for DFS purposes because last week, he only saw 5 targets. He caught 3 of them for only 14 yards. But for a lot of the plays in that game, he was blocking. He wasn't running any routes or anything. He was just blocking, which helps the team in terms of the run game, but doesn't help us as daily fantasy players. So I would fade Martellus Bennett in this spot in both cash and GPPs. What are you thinking here, Ben?
I think we know that Bill Belichick just likes to fuck with us. So last year it was running backs. This year he's going to have 2 tight ends who are both viable plays. But what I can at least infer from the way that he was used is that they're trying to work him into that spot of being that blocking tight end. And since Gronk isn't there, it doesn't mean they're going to change what they want to do with him for the season. And we're looking at only 1 week. They're looking at the year. So I think they're trying to mold him into a certain spot there. But that also makes me believe that LeGarrette Blount is actually a really good play this week. I think that they're going to run the ball a lot with him. He has a really good matchup. I think he's definitely in the league for that 80-yard touchdown game that is 60 to 80 yards or whatever that we can expect out of someone like Rashard Jennings as well. But if they go up, which Jimmy Garoppolo looked pretty good this past week, if they go up, they're just going to be pounding the ball with Blount. So he's going to be fairly high on my list on FanDuel.
Yeah, LeGarrette Blount's my favorite running back this week, and his ownership's going to go down just because of the whole narrative with Bill Belichick. So I definitely like him at a lower ownership, LeGarrette Blount, and just a great value at that as well. Whether the ownership is high or not, he's just a great value there. So I really like the spot for him in that matchup. I don't know. Is there anyone else really here for the Patriots that you would consider for cash or GPP?
Not really. I mean, the thing is with GPP, you can really consider anybody. So, Edelman's, we saw that they still like to throw him the ball, obviously. I mean, he got 7 targets, the same as White, but there weren't really a ton of targets to go around. I think they're just really going to try and run the ball. So I have no interest in the tight ends. There's not really much going on wide receiver. So for me, the play out of this game is LeGarrette Blount.
Can fully agree with you there. Moving on to our next game here, we have the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Houston Texans. For the Chiefs, I know Spencer Ware is on a lot of people's radars. He didn't practice today being Wednesday. He didn't practice dealing with the toe issue. When it comes to Spencer Ware versus Charcandrick West, I kind of like Charcandrick West. I know Spencer Ware is getting a ton of stuff, in his direction. The catches, he caught 7 balls for 129 yards, which is insane. He ran the ball 11 times for a touchdown, but I don't know. It seems like when it comes to the snaps, they're both playing the same amount of snaps, and Charcandrick West is seeing almost the same amount of targets as Spencer Ware when it comes to the passing game. So I think Charcandrick West can act as a very good pivot off of Spencer Ware, especially if, Charcandrick's 3,500, Spencer Ware's 6,100 on DraftKings. And Spencer's 6,800 with Charcandrick West being 5,800 on FanDuel. So I think FanDuel's pricing algorithm gets a little more what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think you're on to something. Definitely we know opportunity is really good for a running back, and if they're getting similar opportunities, then it's they're in a similar spot. So Ware will not be chalk like he was last week, but we saw even Jeremy Langford, someone who isn't highly touted, he had a good game against Houston. So they aren't a stud lead defense that you really need to be scared of, but they're definitely up there in terms of talent. So I think I would probably get off of that situation for cash this week. I was all over Ware this past week, but it just doesn't seem to be a situation that I like. Lamar Miller, I love Lamar Miller. I think he's such an undervalued and underrated running back, but he doesn't get, on paper at least, a great matchup, even though we saw Melvin Gordon run in 2 on them last week. So I think that people are going to have those same thoughts and kind of get away from Lamar Miller. But I think he's viable for GPP, but I don't know if I would use him in cash at 7,700 on FanDuel.
Oh no, I love Lamar Miller this week. Just one more small thought here on the Chiefs here. Travis Kelce, I can get behind him in tournaments, just not too much in cash. But going back to your point on Lamar Miller, I love it. I love the play. Lamar Miller is finally in a great situation for him in Houston. When he was in Miami, he never got the targets, opportunities because once he ran the ball 15 times, they just benched him. The Dolphins just benched him. So, with Lamar Miller now, with Lamar Miller now being properly used in Houston against a Kansas City Chiefs defense that we saw get torched a little bit on the run game last week, I really love Lamar Miller.
Yeah, I mean, there was 3 running back touchdowns last week on them.
Yeah, I love the play a lot for Lamar Miller. And as far as the other options here offensively for the Texans is concerned, you can make the case for Will Fuller. He did have an A-dot last week of 22.4 yards, which is just, how far his targets are, how far Brock was throwing him the ball. Really good performance there. He had 11
basically
targets.
yards at the catch. We
Yeah, I
have
mean,
that on sheet.
he had 11 targets, 5 catches,
targets.
107 yards. He was just monster game.
Hold on, but there's something even more important than just that. Hold on, let me find the number. He was 2 for 3 in the red zone with a touchdown. So 3 targets in the red zone out of 11 total targets. That's really good. That was DeAndre. He had more targets than DeAndre, more red zone targets than DeAndre. So definitely keep eyes on this kid.
Oh, definitely. And then Nuke in this matchup is I like Nuke always at 8,700. People are going to go at that price tag in that price range. People are going to go for different ownership or people are going to go for different people. So DeAndre Hopkins is going to be at a low ownership, and I really like the spot for him there. Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, I mean, I love Kelsey in almost any matchup. I love DeAndre Hopkins in any matchup. I think Macklin makes for a decent play. Fuller is a good play this week, and I really don't see using anybody else on in any position.
Exactly. Moving on to our next game here, we have the Tennessee Titans going up against the Detroit Lions. Looking at the Titans offense first, there really isn't that much to look at. I know Rashard Matthews, Tajay Sharp are at cheap prices, but I faded them last week to success. I mean, Tajay Sharp did get 11 targets last week, 7 catches, 76 yards, no touchdowns. So I do think he has a better game this week, maybe even scoring a touchdown possibly. But their pace is just so slow that I just don't like it at all. I'm not really too comfortable with it in tournaments. Maybe cash you can get behind it with the value. But Delanie Walker, 4,500 is definitely my favorite play for this Tennessee Titans offense. Delanie
that
Walker
sounds like a lock on DraftKings at that price.
Oh, yeah. At 4,500, you got to play him. Had 5 targets last week, 3 catches for 42 yards. But if you were watching any bit of that Detroit Tigers game or Detroit Lions game, it was just like Dwayne Allen was just torching him. So, yeah, it was something. So I love Delanie Walker here. I could also get behind DeMarco Murray in the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, you get a good
back.
matchup for DeMarco and Derrick Henry. I think on FanDuel, when you have Derrick Henry at 5,300, that's a really good price. It's almost minimum. DeMarco Murray's getting the lion's share of the carries, but I think they both make for decent plays. But 7,400 for DeMarco, I don't know if I would pay up for that. I like Amir Abdullah, but he's not getting enough carries, and he has a pretty tough matchup. I think that the Detroit passing game will go overlooked this week, and I'm pretty high on Stafford, Jones, and Tate this week, and I think that since everyone was so high on them last week that they're going to move off them this week. So I think that's going to be one of the under-owned stacks and definitely a very valuable stack in general. So I say keep eyes on that, and I'm going to look to see what our sheets say for the number one value stack real quick.
Yeah, but while you're looking at that there, look at these Detroit Lions. What the hell am I keep saying baseball names? These Detroit Lions here. Theo Riddick, you named off a bunch of the good receivers. I'm fine with those plays. Very good for tournaments because there are other spots to go at those price points this week, but love the spots for tournaments. But Theo Riddick, great play here. I don't think he'll be too highly owned. The only reason why he did so well last week, though, is because Amir Abdullah was kind of like iffy with his injury status. So obviously watch out for that. But Theo Riddick is a PPR masterpiece when it comes to certain things. I mean, last game he had 5 targets, 5 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown. He had a touchdown on the run too. running for 45 yards on 7 attempts with a touchdown. So that might be, more of a variance-driven luck type of situation. But, at the same time, I'm not at all against playing him for this week.
I definitely see validity to him on DraftKings. He's always a decent play there, but I'm not going to be on him on FanDuel.
Nah, yeah, I mean that was just more. That's more of just a tournament play. Very.
And I think both tight ends are in play in this game, so I could definitely see value in Ebron and Delanie at 66. So on FanDuel, both of them are in play. And I really think the Detroit offense is going to go underlooked this week, or overlooked, however you want to say it.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with you there. Looking at our next game here, we have the Baltimore Ravens going up against the Cleveland Browns, and one guy that I really like here, I don't really like anyone else in this matchup, but one guy I really like here, Steve Smith. He had that horrific injury last season, taking him out for the year. We thought he was going to retire, but he didn't. He came back for another year, and I really love the play for him this week. Had 9 targets last week on 5 catches for only 19 yards. He's down to 4,300 on DraftKings, 6,400 on FanDuel, so might be a little bit too pricey there. But on DraftKings, I love the play. Because of the targets he saw last week, because of the big play upside he has. The Browns, we saw what the Eagles did to them last week. I just love the play there. But he's the only offensive player I can get behind for the Baltimore Ravens this week. And I apologize for anyone that just saw me scratch my ear, but it was an itch I just had to scratch. So, but yeah.
Well, we know that Cleveland sucks. We know that it's good to pick on them. I think Flacco, you're throwing against Joe Hayden and everybody else. So if you can avoid Hayden for the most part, I think you'll be looking at a pretty good matchup in general. I could see Steve Smith being a boom bust play. I'm not really on him that much. I mean, he got 9 targets, but he did nothing with them. That's what's tough is, but we don't know how he is coming off that injury, but he had 19 yards on 9 targets, which doesn't give me much confidence. So at the very best for me, he's a GPP play. I'm not on anybody else.
No.
At all.
No, I other than him, I can't get behind anyone in this game. Maybe you can give an argument for guys like Corey Coleman, Gary Barnidge, and Duke Johnson, but they're very contrarian GPP plays.
Yeah, I mean,
this game only has a total of 42
on McCown Barnidge. Yeah. That's going to be pretty popular, but I'm not hopping on that turn.
No, I think it's best if we just move on to a slightly better game here, but not. I really can't say much based on what we saw last week. But we have the Seattle Seahawks going up against the LA Rams. I'm not in love with this game, but again, it's slightly better than the last one. The only great part that I can get behind here, I can get behind Thomas Rawls in the running back spot if he's healthy. He is going to start week 2 at 5,500 on DraftKings and 6,600 on FanDuel. I like Thomas Rawls a lot in the matchup, especially for cash. GPP viable as well. But I think if I am going to use offensive players from this game, I'm stacking Russell Wilson with Doug Baldwin and possibly even Tyler Lockett.
I'm scared to use Russell Wilson. He's coming off a foot injury where you had Sue stepping on his foot, and that's got to be tough for a mobile quarterback who basically makes all of his plays on the run for the most part. The Rams defense didn't look good, but we know they have a really good pass rush. Aaron Donald's one of the best in the game. For me, it's basically just lock in Seattle defense. Don't think twice about it, and don't really consider anything else in this game.
Yeah, I fully agree with you there. Can't get behind any Rams players. at all. Not even the double dip with Tavon Austin and Rams defense, which I love. I love that double dip. But if I can't get behind that this week, then I'm not behind any of these guys here.
Yeah, no, it's
So
not for me. For me, I just look at this game. I see Seattle defense. I lock them in and move on.
yeah, so I think that leads into a
You
nice.
could go Tyler Lockett with the Seattle D GPP just for that punt return.
Yeah, maybe the double dip there is worth. I think that might be where I get my double dip fix this week.
Could do that.
Yeah, but I don't know. Other than that, it's an offensive
You have a fix for a double dip.
Yeah, that's where I'm getting my double dip. Yeah, so moving on to our next game here. It's a very interesting one. Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Arizona Cardinals. And looking at the Tampa Bay side of this, Jameis Winston has a very solid cash game appeal to him, maybe even some GPP appeal. I don't want to get too nerdy here, but the standard deviation from Jameis Winston's fantasy performances from last season, as I was evaluating it, he had the lowest standard deviation of any starting quarterback that played a game last year. So definitely makes himself fantastic for cash. GPPs, I can also get behind him, just because he had a great game last week. So I can get behind him with the Jameis Winston, Mike Evans, Vincent Jackson stack. I don't like Doug Martin a whole lot here. Arizona Cardinals defense is very solid against the run, but I can definitely get behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers stack here. Very low ownership this week.
I could definitely agree with the low ownership because I'm not going to be contributing to it. I love Arizona defense. I think they're up as one of the top defenses in the league, especially when you talk about their roaming secondary. Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu are two of my favorite players. I'm all over Arizona offense this game. We know Tampa Bay, they have two rookie corners out there. They let Mohamed Sanu get wide open for almost 100 yards last week. Just easy money. So for me, I'm all over Arizona stack this week. It's a 50 over-under, and Arizona's expected to win by almost 7 points. And that's very large in terms of Vegas lines. So I love the matchup that they have this week. I will be all over Arizona passing game, even with a little bit of David Johnson in there, even though actually on FanDuel he's $9,000, so that's a little too high for me. But I'm all over this passing game for Arizona this week.
Yeah, so let's look at them a little bit. Carson Palmer is in play. Obviously this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense hasn't been proven to do much. Before I get into that, I do need to explain. I guess I need to explain standard deviation a little bit here. All standard deviation is just how much off the mean a performance is, right? So if a player on average scores 25 fantasy points and he scores 32 fantasy points, that means the standard deviation is 7. He scored 7 more points than his average. Or, on the other side of things.
Yeah, basically you can look at it as if you're averaging 25 points per week, there's a player who will get 25 points every single game, and he has a very, very low standard deviation of 0. Now, if he gets 50 and then the next game gets 0, he's still averaging 25, but his standard deviation is 50. So you want to look for the lowest number because then you could see who hits that average more consistently and who's more around that number on a daily basis.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much our shortened lesson on standard deviation and a bunch of other cool shit that I keep learning in my stat class that I'm actually finding useful for fantasy sports. So more on that in another podcast. But
so Arizona, they had 10 of the targets went to Larry Fitzgerald, 7 to Michael Floyd, 6 to David Johnson, and 4 to John Brown. I think this is a week that John Brown's going to see around 7 targets or so. And with the rookies that we're going to have on the side, I think Michael Floyd and John Brown are going to be excellent GPP options this week, with Larry Fitzgerald being, of course, a safe cash option.
Exactly. Yeah, I fully agree with you there. Can't argue with that. I don't know. I kind of like Michael Floyd a lot more than John Brown, but I don't know. I don't know where some of these targets go. Who knows?
They're
But
different players. They're just different type of
yeah,
players. So if you
yeah,
want Michael Floyd, where you're hoping for the jump ball and him come down with it, that's great. I like John Brown more for the just burn him, take the top off, and just hit a deep ball with him. So that in my opinion, I'm gonna be on John Brown a decent amount.
exactly. Moving on to our next game here, we have a intriguing one. In the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against the San Diego Chargers. And, look at these Jacksonville Jaguars first before we get to Value City over here in San Diego. Um, Allen Robinson, I mean, the Chargers defense is just terrible. So Allen Robinson is in play. Allen Hurns is in play. Julius Thomas is in play. TJ Yeldon is in play at 4,700 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. Yeah, I like the spot there for him, for the Jaguars a lot.
Yeah, I think if Chris Ivory is out again, then Yeldon certainly makes for a pretty decent play. Wide receiver wise, I mean, I love the Jacksonville guys. I love the Allen squared with Robinson and Hurns. This isn't a great matchup for them. San Diego's secondary is actually better against the pass than a lot of people think, but it's probably going to be a passing game. Rivers doesn't have Allen, and we saw last year that when he doesn't have Allen, he just throws the ball and tries to find anybody who will catch it. So I think that it's going to be a passing game and could sneakily end up being pretty high scoring. So you would be looking for probably San Diego to be winning with Jacksonville trailing. But even with San Diego winning, it doesn't seem like they're going to be looking to run the clock out with the ball, with Melvin and Woodhead as not true big running backs to do that. So I think it's going to be a passing game.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you there. I really like the San Diego offense tonight with some value. With Keenan Allen now out for the rest of the season with the torn ACL, Travis Benjamin at 6,100 on FanDuel, 4,400 on DraftKings, definitely presents himself with a ton of value. Antonio Gates at 4,500 is, Phillip Rivers' BFF. So, love the spot there. And Melvin Gordon, as we were saying, Danny Woodhead, another guy who's just fantastic in PPR formats. I mean, he saw 7 targets last week in Kansas City with 5 catches for 31 yards and a touchdown. And then he ran the ball 16 times for 89 yards, which is not great, but it's okay.
Surprising for him, though.
Definitely surprising for, good for him. But I don't know. I don't know. I think we went through, these guys on the Chargers here, and there's, to sum it all up, there is just a ton of value to be had at that position.
Travis Benjamin, especially on DK. He received the most targets on the team this week over Danny Woodhead, even though Woodhead had more touches. But Travis Benjamin actually had 4 red zone targets, completed 2 of them. But if you're getting that many red zone targets game 1, I think it's safe to say that he's going to be looking at him and then possibly Gates on the back end. But someone who we didn't talk about, who I think is going to make a splash, is Tyrell Williams. I think he's someone that you should really look at this week. He's pretty cheap. I think he's going to be a better play over Dontrell Inman filling in for Keenan Allen. So keep an eye on Tyrell Williams this week. I think he makes for a pretty good value play.
Can fully agree with you there. Looking at our next game here, we have the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Oakland Raiders, a game that I also think can be a sneaky shootout. Looking at this Atlanta Falcons offense first, Matt Ryan is definitely a guy to look at. here, not by himself, of course, but stacked with Julio Jones makes for a very good play because, I don't know, this Oakland Raiders, as we saw last week,
Suspect.
very, very iffy defense. They have made some improvements, but I don't think they're there just yet. So, yeah, obviously Matt Ryan with Julio Jones. I don't like Devontae Freeman at all. That running back situation in Atlanta is just way too risky for my liking, and I just want to fade it outright just because no one is the clear definitive number one anymore in Atlanta. So I'm fading both of these running backs here regardless of their price.
Tevin Coleman at least.
Coleman, you can somewhat make an argument for him, but he's still not. I don't know. His time will come this year. I definitely think he'll be a very good fantasy running back for this year, but I don't think this is the spot where that happens. Really, Julio Jones and Mohamed Sanu are the only guys that can really justify his fantastic plays here.
Yeah, Sanu, man. I really like Sanu, and I think that he's going to be a good play this week. I think that stack in general is going to be good. Matt Ryan, Julio, and Sanu, and you could find some decent value as a stack there. And I was on Sanu this past week, actually. I was telling people about it in the premium chat. I said if you need wide receiver salary relief on FanDuel, if you want to get wild, Mohamed Sanu may actually be a decent play if you're using game theory. We know Julio hurt his ankle in preseason. Who knows if he's 100%? Not saying I don't have tons of exposure, but I definitely do. But Tampa Bay has rookie corners. While JJ will probably eat, I think Sanu can possibly make value if he scored a touchdown. And he had a really good game. So I would definitely be on him this week as well. And that's one of my top value stacks of the week.
Yeah, I really like that idea too. Looking at these Oakland Raiders here, also some guys worth looking at. Derek Carr with Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree. Definitely guys worth a look there. Clive Walford. What's that?
This is going to be a shootout.
Oh, this is definitely going to be a shootout. Clive Walford's also a guy you can look at, kind of. Saw 5 targets on Sunday with 3 catches for 25 yards. I don't know how much of the red zone work. I'll look at that in a second when I can pull it up.
I got it right here.
How many reds? What is?
He had 1 target in the red zone.
1 target in the red zone.
Seth Roberts had 2, and Jalen Richard had 2.
Yeah, not terrible, but he's definitely worth a look because of that. I don't know. He's going to be very low owned, and he might sneak in a touchdown there. But I do like Clive Walford, kind of. Not a fan of Latavius Murray this week. I don't think this is the matchup where he succeeds. But I really just like Derek Carr, Michael Crabtree, Amari Cooper stack. Probably going to be lower owned because of the other options that we've talked about earlier in the show here.
That's our number one value stack of the week. Carr, Amari Cooper, and Crabtree.
Yeah, so there you go. Definitely some justification there to use that. Seth Roberts. Is Seth Roberts viable?
Not
Can I get behind Seth Roberts? No, I don't know. I can't see it. I just looked at him as an option, but I don't know. I can't see the viability there.
Nah, not to me.
Moving on. Yeah, moving on to our next game here. We have the Indianapolis Colts going up against the Denver Broncos. And I don't know if I like this at all. Obviously, we've seen that the Broncos' defense is just lethal.
Yeah, there's nothing in this game for me.
I'm just not comfortable with any of these guys. I mean, tournament shots maybe, but this Colts offense in Denver, I don't trust the situation at all. And these prices aren't attractive enough for me to get on it.
I'm not on this game at all, except I'm. It's kind of crazy, but I mean, actually, I like C.J. Anderson. I think that people will be chasing him from last week, but they're just going to run the ball. They're going to pound it out. They don't trust Simeon enough, but I would use C.J. Anderson as a standalone or with the Denver D. But I was possibly thinking about maybe using Simeon with with Demarius and Sanders in one of those very big tournaments. So that's something I could see maybe using because the Colts just have no secondary, but there's really nothing in this game for me.
Exactly. Yeah, I fully agree with you there. I what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so I mean Denver Broncos, great defense for me this week. Other than that, I just hate the plays across the board. So we'll be moving on here to our last game of the slate because, and I mean, this is the one that's really covered by DraftKings. So, this is looking at this one here. I don't know why I can't form a sentence right now, but look at these Packers first. Going to Minnesota, opening up that new stadium in Minnesota. I don't know. I mean, there might be some narrative streak going on here for the Vikings because of that, but I mean, I'm not gonna factor that in too much. But I don't know if I really like a lot of these plays here for the Packers. Vegas only has this game at a 44-point total, and the Packers favored by only 2 points. So I don't know. I can't really predict game script off of that too well. But I don't think this is going to be a high-scoring affair. This Vikings defense is very good.
Yeah, I'm not on this game really at all, except what's Stephon Diggs' price on DraftKings?
Stephon Diggs is 5,100 on DraftKings.
All right, so I'll be using Diggs on DraftKings. I'm not sure how much Green Bay exposure I'll get, but the one thing we do know is Rodgers is elite. Jordy Nelson is one of the best in the game, and when Nelson's there, Cobb plays better. So I could see myself using them potentially in GPP, but it seems the obvious cash options are pretty weak for this slate. So it's going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of lower percentages for quarterbacks than we would have seen in a normal week. But we don't have Rodgers projected as one of our top plays.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the quarterback ownership across the board is probably going to be a lot flatter than it was last week. I mean, obviously Dak Prescott affected that ownership scale a lot. Yeah, but as far as this game is concerned, I don't really like a lot of the offense here. I think the defenses prevail. Slower paced game, so I'm not a huge fan of anything here. Just better options to go across the board offensively. And I would consider the Vikings defense. That's all I will consider. And their tournament plays this week.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, last week it was interesting, but I don't think I would be able to play them against Rodgers. That's just crazy for me.
Yeah, I mean, my justification for this is just because they do get the pressure. The Vikings defense gets pressure on the quarterback, and I think this is just my opinion, but I think the greatest correlator, if that's even a word, the greatest correlator to defensive success is the amount of hurries that you get on an opposing quarterback, and what I see from the Vikings, they get a ton of that. So dating back to last season and then last week against the Titans, you do see that. So I do like the Vikings as a contrarian tournament play, just for that reason.
It's very, very interesting. It doesn't seem like the direction I would lean towards. They were actually the third-ranked defense for us last week behind Carolina and Seattle, and they did well, but I didn't have any exposure. I had zero exposure to them just because I basically locked in Seattle and Philly everywhere except for the Monday night slate where I was on the Niners. So for me, I think one of the just looking at our sheets, and we're releasing them tonight at some point when we get off the video, but it looks like the Raiders are actually one of the higher ranked defenses that people typically wouldn't be on, and the Colts. So those are two very interesting defenses that I probably won't be on, but I said that about Minnesota and they went off. So let's see how those play out. Keep eyes on Raiders and Colts GPP defense, and I'll throw them in just to try it out. But that's what we see here. So
Yeah. And to close out our show here, another reason not to play Tavon Austin, just involved in a car chase in California per TMZ.
Well, he's fast as shit.
Yeah, he's a very fast guy with his legs, but his BMW is apparently faster. Was pulled over by the cops. Right now has a $50,000 bail for him and his friend, who was the driver of the car. But it was Tavon Austin's car, and fade for that reason. I mean, fade for other reasons, but
for sure,
I guess that reason fade him.
Yeah, man, I'm not on that. That's wild, but yeah, that happens, man. I mean, it's going to be such an interesting week because there's not a lot of straight obvious chalk plays, so the ownership's going to be a little all over the place. And it's really going to be interesting to see how some of these quarterbacks, first-year quarterbacks really handle themselves. So, yeah, man, I really like this format of going game by game. Of course, we'll get better at it, and it'll go quicker, and we'll organize a little bit better, of course. But I really feel like I have a good grasp of the slate and how I feel about it, at least for now.
Yeah, I've definitely. This is definitely my. I mean, obviously, I like to look at this as my my first run through the slate, like first real deep run through of a slate,
right. And
I really learn a lot just by just talking about this. Even if I sound stupid, I like to know that I'm getting something out of it. When I do
right.
Well,
that's the way I feel. I feel like just really going through and just looking at the validity of all the different plays and discussing if I like them cash or GPP. It's a lot better than if I'm just going through it by myself. So to be able to bounce ideas off, I think it really went well. And hopefully the people who were listening were able to get some good info out of it as well.
I'd like to hope so.
Absolutely, man.
Yes.
But
okay,
thanks again for hosting, and we of course appreciate you at Daily Roto Sharks.
And I love being on the show every week.
Great.
Right.
Have a good night, guys, and we'll stay in touch throughout the weekend, and we'll be putting out our sheets tonight or tomorrow morning, and then we'll have all the articles out by the weekend.
Yep. Good luck in your games this weekend, guys.
Take care.